What's up, everybody? 702 Exotic here, back at you with another live. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a live reaction to a video. And this is a crazy video right here. We got something in the realms where there is a catastrophic event that happened on Mars, right? Crazy stuff. I'm talking about super crazy stuff. Like, I'm talking about it was a nuclear war, right? And I'm talking about mind-blowing stuff, man. So we're gonna look at that video, and this guy named Dr. John Brandenburg, and he was what did he do here for? So I know he was a plasma. He worked on plasmas, right? And he was the one who discovered water on Mars. So, like, you got to think about it. This guy is not just anybody. He discovered water on Mars, right? And he discovered that it once had an ocean in 1987 is when he proved it to be true, right? Just reading over the documents that he had. It's a lot of published things. Obviously, it's everyone. And we're gonna see when he found out, you know, the unthinkable, right? Pretty much the unthinkable. In ways that we don't think of things to be so much true, right? And what am I talking about? Because, you know, we work our day-to-day lives. We do our daily commutes, right? We don't put too much thought of what happened eons ago, right? We're talking about eons ago. What if there was a civilization on Mars? We're talking eons ago. Where were they at? Planetary, right? In Mars, but they had the planetary travel, meaning there's other civilizations. And now they're coming to say that there could be millions of civilizations out there, right? Not just hundreds, millions of civilizations out there. Almost to say, remember in Men in Black how, you know, people would check in airports, passports. Think about that to be true with aliens, right? And shout out to Jesse Michaels, my man. Jesse Michaels out there getting those fire interviews. Not only getting the fire interviews, having people being able to talk about this, right? Because that's the thing. The fact that people can't talk about this and now are, it's amazing, right? It's amazing. Let's bring you Wild Bill Grows, Afternoon 420. Yes, sir. Let's go. Make sure y'all hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that like button. It's not possible without you guys, man. That way we can be pushed out to other people's algorithms. You know, it's visible to other people, but it's only possible if you guys hit that like button. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. And no further ado, we're going to get into this video, and it's a banger, man. Just from the couple seconds that I saw. You know, I don't always go live for these things, but I did ask Jesse Michaels if I can go live and do live reactions to his videos. He said it's all good. So we asked permission. Okay. And we're going to do it now. So we're going to go ahead and play the video. It's a pretty long one. Make sure y'all roll up. Make sure you get your blunts. Make sure you get your dabs. Make sure you get your joints rolled up, because it's going to be a banger, man. Y'all stay tuned. Check this out right here.
I asked this fellow, I said, is there really a UFO cover-up? And he said, yes. He said, and that's all I can tell you. The rest you can figure out for yourself. Mars was covered with liquid water. I was the one to find the Martian Ocean.
Let me find me a lighter.
Menza, which is a site where there's the face and then there's a five-sided pyramid. NASA never shows that picture of the face beside the pyramid together in any of their public photos because it becomes obvious.
Really?
We're looking at archaeology. They kind of made fun of me as the Mars guy, and then suddenly Carl Sagan is trying to get a hold of me, and I said, well, Carl, what'd you think of the pictures? Brandenburg, why are you causing this trouble?
Oh.
I'd found and digested the isotopic evidence. And when it all hit me, I wept like a child. It looked like a thermonuclear holocaust. We were so afraid it would happen on Earth.
Different parts of the brain have different activities. You know that, don't you?
Maybe you should interview me.
I'm here with Dr. John Brandenburg, and it's an absolute honor to have him. You first popped up because I did a piece on Townsend Brown, and my audience has heard me talk about Townsend Brown ad nauseum. He's this mid-century inventor who I think did some interesting things in the world of gravity, possibly helping marry gravity and electromagnetism from an experimental standpoint.
Yes.
Maybe not in the strongest, the strongest theoretician.
Sorry, I just got.
There's all this Twitter noise about this guy, John
I just got
who has
a text
his own
message.
model,
I'm sorry.
gem theory.
Gem theory.
Gravity electromagnetism, is that right?
Just gravity electromagnetism.
And then more recently, I've started to get interested in kind of Mars anomalies, which have gone kind of viral. Like Joe Rogan recently retweeted my buddy Chris Ramsey, who posted.
Ooh.
This photo that's now been verified at the highest levels of this sort of square structure on Mars.
Photo from a square structure on Mars.
A long lineage, as you know, of seemingly artificial structures on Mars. And you're about as deep as anybody on that topic.
Yes.
And so it's just an absolute honor to have you, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, Jesse, it's a pleasure and honor to be on your show.
Awesome.
You have had many awesome guests, and I've followed your work. It's very good.
Well, you're among the most awesome. And why don't we start with just because we're going to be getting into pretty interesting territory that for the average, person who believes in kind of consensus or mainstream science might feel beyond the pale. So I think what's possibly most remarkable about you is you have very traditionally impressive bona fides and credentials. So what's your background?
Well, I grew up in Oregon, and I went to school for undergraduate at Southern Oregon University, majoring in physics and math, and inspired by my uncle who worked on the Manhattan Project during World War II. I wanted to go on for my PhD, and they encouraged that. So I ended up working at Lawrence Livermore National Lab, which was the Center for Fusion Research at the time. It's also
smart.
Had the big laser fusion experiment, and at the other end of the lab, though, they were building hydrogen
Shout out
bombs.
Scooby Grows.
It was a very interesting atmosphere. Edward Teller was kind of the mentor of the program, and it was a very entertaining character to hear talk, and he would come and talk to us, and I had several pleasant conversations with him. It was very inspirational. So then I finished there, and I went on to another government lab called Sandia National Lab and worked on directed energy weapons. I wanted to work on fusion, but all the money had suddenly dried up for fusion research. And so I worked in New Mexico for about 3 years, and that's when the laboratory staff experienced this moment of great angst and kind of morale collapse because of two things. The nuclear winter came out, and then there was a Able Archer crisis of 1983, which was classified. We were as close to a nuclear war as we were during the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it was secret. Only people on the lab premises inside the fence knew how bad things were. And I felt in despair, like a lot of other people at the lab.
Facts, I bet,
we were
man.
going to have a nuclear war by accident.
Hey, thank you for that light.
And then I saw this interesting stuff on Mars, and I checked it out, and I thought suddenly I had hope for the future for the human race. I thought, well, if we discover a dead civilization on Mars, then the Cold War will be over. The Russians and the Americans will go to Mars together and investigate. And I remember the first night after seeing that evidence, putting my little daughter to bed and having hope for her future. And so then I went from there to Washington, D.C. and worked as a defense contractor as a consulting physicist to the Pentagon and the intel agencies. And,
Ooh.
at the time, I didn't believe in UFOs, but after working
That's
there
crazy.
for about
Most people don't believe in
year,
UFOs still.
suddenly it was absolutely clear there was a UFO cover-up.
And at what point did that become clear?
Well, I talked to a friend of a friend, worked for the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Dang, it's always a friend of a friend, right?
Inter-staff level. He was a colonel.
Always.
And
Oh, dang, he had
I've
big
been hearing
ties.
all of this rumors. The rumors were just very thick in the air during the Reagan administration. He was warning about invasions from outer space. And,
In the Reagan days.
that we ought to end the Cold War because of that. And I asked this fellow, I said, is there really a UFO cover-up? And he said, yes. He said, and that's all I can tell you. He says, the rest you can figure out for yourself, he says.
This guy was on
That is
Chairman of
it.
the Joint Chiefs, or
He worked for the Joint Chiefs as a staff.
so you spoke. It was a friend of a friend, but you spoke directly to the person.
Yes, I did.
The Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he basically
He was not a chairman. He was not one of the Joint Chiefs, but he was part of their staff.
staffer or something.
Yeah, supporter.
And he was like, there is definitely a there
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
And then I confirmed that
100%.
through a second
And this is back in the Reagan days.
source.
There was a second source.
He was some hapless character I called at Space Command, and I said, I've heard there is an extraterrestrial threat whose existence is classified. I'd like to help with that program. And he said, oh, okay, here, let me see if I can connect you with somebody. And then he says, we'll have to call you back on that.
What was Edward Teller like? You know, obviously, famous
he was
inventor
a
of the
very
hydrogen bomb, and
very animated. He had big eyebrows. He's Hungarian and Jewish, and he, being Hungarian, he had a congenital fear of the Russians, and he was just I considered him a very creative, enlightened person.
really,
Yes, and
because he's sort of, it's funny, post the movie Oppenheimer, I feel
Yes.
like he's painted as this sort of villain who wants to just build a bigger and bigger bomb.
Right.
And if you do read his letters around the creation of the H-bomb, it does belie somebody who has a conscience.
Right.
He's saying, I think we need to do this for the Western world, because if we don't do this, the other side is going to do it,
Yes.
and it's actually really important that we figure this out. So yeah, what's your take on him? I mean,
I believe he was acting on instinct, and he was from Hungary, which has a bad history with Russia, and he just intuitively felt that the Russians were working on the hydrogen bomb, and now that they had the atomic bomb, they'd gotten the atomic bomb secret, and that was what you needed to set off the hydrogen bomb. It was basically the detonator cap, and he says, we can't stop working on the hydrogen bomb, because if we do, Joseph Stalin will get the hydrogen bomb and we won't have it.
Damn. So if one stops working on it, one picks up the work.
Suffering from a great deal of angst about the bomb being used in World War II. And he resisted this. He says, no, we don't need the hydrogen bomb. We have the atomic bomb. And the Russians will never figure out how to build a hydrogen bomb. And later, Teller and Sakharov actually got to meet. And Sakharov, the father of the Russian hydrogen bomb, looked at all of Teller's communiques and the back and forth and said, oh, Teller was right. We would have never stopped working on the hydrogen bomb. Joe Stalin wanted the hydrogen bomb.
Did he? So you said you were working down the hall from him, and he was working on hydrogen bombs. Just for the audience's perspective, hydrogen bomb is basically uncontrolled fusion.
Uncontrolled
reaction.
fusion.
And the kind of holy grail in energy would be controlled fusion.
Controlled fusion.
That's why I've worked most of my career on.
Did Teller believe in the ideal
That's
of
crazy.
cold fusion, or not necessarily cold fusion, but controlled fusion?
Oh, yes, he did. He did. And curiously enough, Andrei Sakharov is the designer of the tokamak, which is the leading contender to be a controlled fusion.
And is there's a relationship between Sakharov and Teller?
Well, they were both brilliant people, and they both kind of they thought down the same passages. They looked at the data and came to the same conclusions. even though they were completely isolated from each other.
Are all the conspiracies about controlled free energy? You know, you have people in UFO world like Stephen Greer who are like, "Ooh, it's the lost century. We figured this out 100 years ago with Tesla. The patents have left all these patent offices and inventors have died." And they'll go through like a long
Champ Mike. So what we're watching is we're pretty much watching a scientist. His name is John Brandenburg, plasma physic. Discovered the water on Mars, right? He's the one who discovered the water on Mars. Is saying he's gonna explain why he thinks it was a civilization on Mars and was wiped out by a nuclear catastrophic event. Pretty much a nuclear event happened on Mars, and he's gonna explain to you. So he's pretty much explaining his accolades right now at this point.
list of these inventors who, like, you know, Stan Meyer had a car that ran on water or whatever. And like, I don't know what to think about it. Look, do I believe oligopolists kind of run the U.S. or have for a long time? Like, basically, yeah, I do. Do I believe that they would commit sort of violence to maintain their oligopoly and ensure scarcity? Yes. Do I also simultaneously think that we have some 0-point energy machine or controlled fusion reactor hiding in a closet at Lockheed or something? I'm not so sure. So yeah, what do you think? Are you still lugging around one of those bulky?
Shout out to
worn-out
Jesse
wallets?
Michaels, man.
You know,
He's out there doing it.
Your posture's not great due to
Yeah.
that wallet.
yeah.
Are you aware of that?
And we can't
I
pass
will-
up on
I'm
his
currently
ads
now
either. So we
more
had to show his
self-aware of
ads
my
too.
posture.
So we're
It
gonna
might be time for an upgrade.
Oh, what do you
Shout 'em out.
suggest?
My personal suggestion is Ridge Wallet. Look at this sleek design. Do you see it?
y'all
Oh,
go
wow,
cop
so
that
sleek.
wallet, man.
Pretty sleek. Uh-huh. This thing holds up to 12 cards
Yeah.
plus cash.
All in a slim, durable, and stylish package too.
You took the words right
Rich.
out of my mouth.
Hey, those
Ridge
things are
wallets
slick
feature
too, man.
RFID blocking technology, so digital pickpockets won't stand a chance. Plus, with their AirTag attachment, you'll never lose your wallet again. Where'd it go?
I lost my wallet.
Where-
I was just checking my AirTag. Easy.
Oh,
Yeah.
comes with
I
an
was
air
recently in the Colorado
built-in
mountains, and
tag,
if I
champ.
had
You
lost
can't
my
beat that.
Ridge wallet, I would have no problem tracking it down, even in the Rockies. Right now, Ridge is having their once-a-year anniversary sale. So get up to 40% off at ridge.com/cosmic. Just head
Hey.
to ridge.com/cosmic to see their biggest sale
40%
of the year.
off. Y'all
After
better
purchase,
hop
they
on
will
that.
Ask about where you heard about them. Where did they hear about Ridge
702
Wallet?
Exotic. That's where y'all heard about
You
it.
heard it here first on American Alchemy.
Yeah.
Please support
Shout out
our
Jesse
show
Michaels.
and tell them our show sent you. Upgrade your wallet. Thank me later.
I think that
Back to the
controlled
show.
fusion would be the ultimate fusion device. The ultimate energy source. 0-point energy is very important to understand the theory of unifying gravity and electromagnetism because it's in quantum mechanics. However,
Go hit that like button, man. Subscribe to the
according
channel.
Andrei Sakharov, the way to tap 0-point energy is have a black hole in your basement and feed it.
We need a black hole in our
stray
basement,
animals
champ.
And things you don't want, and get the energy. Some of the energy goes into the black hole, and some of it
Damn.
bursts out at
We're on some Rick and
you
Morty.
don't want to have a black hole in your basement.
No, it doesn't sound so great. But I guess the question is do you think there's been a line of suppressed science that has been hidden in the black, but could amount to real civil side
Thank you for that like, champ.
updates in the way we live our lives, the way our cities are built?
I'm not known for being a skeptic about things, but I'm a skeptic about that. I do not think, short of making your own black hole and trying to keep it in your basement, you can harness free energy. Now, I could be wrong.
Wow.
The times I've been wrong in my career have been mostly when I said, this can't be done.
Right.
And but I don't subscribe to Jim Greer's idea that the government is keeping free energy from us. I think I do know that the fossil fuel industry is probably the most well-moneyed, most powerful
Yep.
lobbying group on Earth. There are countries where it is their entire lifeblood is fossil fuel. If you
Dang.
endanger that, you will take away. You'll be viewed as taking away their entire way of life. So, do I believe that
Dang, shout out to the
there's
Saudis.
an energy oligarchy trying to guard its turf? I'm afraid I do, but I think that because of global warming, which I believe is happening, we have to come up with a new form of energy.
I sat down a couple of years ago with Eric Weinstein, an old colleague of mine, and Hal Puthoff, who's a kind of a renowned scientist and
Love Hal.
great guy. And Hal, made some interesting comments around there was this anti-gravity craze in the 50s. And then, in the 60s, it kind of just like vaporized. Like
Yes, it did.
It kind of went, it seemed, and he goes, they either didn't get anywhere or it went black. And that was like this famous line from that interview that got like clipped a bunch because, he's this kind of spooky insider.
I agree with Hal.
There's a famous series came out in the Miami Herald and other newspapers in probably the 50s. The author was Talbert, and he did a series where he found out that a number of aerospace engineering companies were suddenly interested in anti-gravity, and that people like DeWitt on up and down, really top level physicists, were suddenly getting grants to look at the idea of anti-gravity. For example,
See what you got going on, Mike. I'm doing the ethos, PSI ops, elevate 2BE blunt, Lit Farms, lemon cherry gelato, sticky rice, and pink lemonade. Damn, I grew on the pink lemonade a long time ago. Was it? No, wait. It was something pink. I'm not sure if it was the pink lemonade, but definitely not by Ethos. When I was growing, there wasn't no Ethos around yet. Any experience with any of these? Just that I think it was pink something. I remember. But yeah, man, that lemon cherry gelato sounds fire too. Sticky rice. Yeah, man, Ethos got some bangers over there.
It came
It's
along.
from the Gravity Research Foundation in Boston.
Right. And so it looked like it was going to be a big explosion. But anyway, then it all sort of quieted down. And I could take two implications of that, and that is it quieted down because nobody ever got anywhere. Or it quieted down because they did get somewhere and it went black.
So you think from Hal that's like a I can neither confirm nor deny statement, and
Yes,
that it's
I would say
confirming without
that
confirming it.
Hal is still very much part of that world, and he has to follow its rules.
Why do you agree with Hal that anti-gravity updates were made and went black?
Well, obviously, if you have anti-gravity technology or what they call gravity modification, that's the
Gravity.
We're not anti-gravity here. We just want it to be a little bit more flexible.
Gravity
So,
modification.
It would have great military importance. Einstein worked very hard on trying to do a unified field theory, to unify that, there are four forces of nature. Two of them are infinite range. One is electromagnetism, one is gravity.
Dang.
The weak, the strong force, they run things at the size of the nucleus in the atom.
Right.
And they're powerful, but they don't have long range. Einstein just figured, okay, I can pick out the two long-range forces and unify them. And he made a lot of progress, and he helped get Kaluza-Klein theory, which has a hidden fifth dimension to unify gravity and A&M mathematically.
A
He helped
fifth
get that published.
dimension?
He didn't like the fifth dimension, but he decided that the math worked out so beautifully that it must be true. Fifth Dimension was one of my favorite groups during the 60s, by the way. So
Up and away.
up and
Man, y'all
away.
make sure you hit that like
But
button.
so, you're saying that Einstein might have figured out the unification mathematically? Because the modern understanding is that
there's a saying that on his deathbed,
I think he picked up on
became
Einstein's
ecstatic
work
and
too.
was
He tried to pick up on
talking
it.
excitedly to his nurse in German, like he'd had a conceptual breakthrough. And the nurse didn't understand German. So then he got back in his bed, lay down, and passed away. So he died happy. So he may have some last moment.
Damn, he died with the
Putoff and I
key.
both have come up with similar theories. And we just did it by just simple deduction from physics. The nice thing about gravity theory and electromagnetism, you don't.
It's almost like where they say, once you figured it out, it's too late, right? Anytime you've already figured something out, you're either done with the project or, in this case, done with life.
Need to have a quantum theory of gravity to unify gravity and NM. There's there's an electromagnetic effect I found that looks just like gravity. You can call it radiation pressure. And Sonder Sakharov found something very similar, and this is what led Hal Puthoff to develop his work. And the only thing different between my theory and Hal Puthoff's theory is my theory predicts big G, the gravitation constants, and
he said big
and
G.
the mass of the proton. Imagine the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang. Before the Big Bang, nothing. Suddenly, 1 second later,
Everything?
the universe is a fireball of hydrogen plasma, almost pure hydrogen, like 1% neutrons, enough to trigger some nuclear reactions. But it's basically just hydrogen. So the vacuum is hardwired to make hydrogen, electrons and protons, which are both stable. They last forever. And and if you ratio their masses, it's 1836, and the square root of that is 42, which I did not know when I wrote. I did not know about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when I wrote my original theory and derived that result. The key number to the universe.
That went right over my head, man.
It turns out to.
Well, so I want to get into your unification theory towards the end of the episode, because I think that's, to a lot of people, the most interesting, but it's also, I think, maybe the least accessible for the lay audience. How did you get into the idea that there may have been life on Mars in the past, in the distant past?
The Viking missions had been in 1976, and when I was in graduate school, and they gave the verdict. They tested for life in the soil, and they said,
"You want to just tell people what are the Vikings?"
The Vikings were a very ambitious double probe mission. It was ultimate vacuum tube technology kind of mission. And they sent these probes to Mars. They photographed the surface of Mars in great detail with just superb cameras. They landed 2 landers to test the soil for life. And they got mixed results, which now can be interpreted as they found life. But at the same time, they also sampled the atmosphere and found a great excess of radiogenic isotopes. They're stable isotopes, but they're formed by powerful nuclear reactions. And they found that on Mars, and that made Mars unique. It was so unique that when we started getting meteorites, we started recognizing, oh, there are these strange meteorites.
Damn,
And
look at that.
It looks like they come from Mars, and they tested the gas trapped and they found the same
sand Mars.
The same pattern of strange strange isotopes in the Mars, what they thought were Mars meteorites, and that's how they figured out that they were from Mars, because Mars isotopic signatures are so unique in the solar system.
And what
it's almost like a fingerprint.
Signatures did they find?
Well, they found a large amount of xenon-129, which is the product of 2 things: supernova explosions and hydrogen bomb explosions. And we know there was no supernova on Mars. If there was, there wouldn't be a solar system here.
And you said there was one other argon?
Also, there's
isotopes.
When you irradiate rocks that have potassium in them, and all rocks do, they produce a isotope called argon-40, and that's super abundant on Mars. So you have 2 things that are products of what look like an intense
nuclear
reaction on Mars in the atmosphere, and they're the residues of that remain in the atmosphere. They're stable and they last forever. So but they also found what looked like archaeology on Mars. And that was the initially
that's
the most exciting
crazy.
thing. I
Yo,
only found out the
archaeology.
significance of the isotopes.
Yo, they found
on
spots on
from
Mars,
a
like
staffer at
real
Sandia Labs.
spots.
What's the convention? If I were to, be sitting across from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I said, I were to say, because he's
I've
tried
met
to
him. He's a very pleasant fellow.
he's tried to explain away, the face on Sidonia or whatever that, this famous, seemingly artificial
I would
structure or
love to
whatever.
sit down and talk with him.
That would be great to host a debate. He did.
As long as they let me bring my pictures of it from NASA.
Yeah, I think he would shy away from debate. I think he likes, to kind of pontificate and like act smarter than everybody else on his own show. But
I'm calling him out. Throw down, dude.
Hey, you
called him
got a
out multiple
call out,
times.
champ.
Down.
and he just, I think he's
I'll be
afraid.
waiting.
Yeah, let's do
Oh, an official call out
from your lips
to
God's
Neil
ears.
deGrasse
But-
Tyson.
So if I were sitting across from him, let's just a little audience surrogate, devil's advocate question.
Sure.
How would he explain xenon 129 and argon 40?
He can't.
Oh,
Would he
That's
admit?
the short answer.
Would he admit
it
that-
is
that
oh,
they-
he probably wouldn't admit it, but I've
No,
checked.
but would he admit that we found those?
Oh,
on
yes, he would. Yes,
That's
he
a
would.
fact.
That's a fact.
Okay.
That's indisputable. And
So he would just say there's probably some other explanation, but I don't know what it is.
but
or
yeah,
something?
that's what he would say.
Yeah, that's
and
usually the case,
I have reviewed the literature very carefully on this. You can imagine I'm sticking my neck out as a scientist.
Yep.
But I found that the consensus among the real experts on isotopes, not just on Mars, but on the other planets and meteorites and things like this, is that there is no explanation for the xenon 129 superabundance or the argon 40 superabundance.
Yeah. So let's get into other possible evidence. Okay, so that's really interesting. And do the two, so xenon 129, that would come from these large hydrogen explosions,
Yes.
is that right? And then argon.
And supernovas, but it was not a supernova on Mars.
Right, and I don't think anybody would contest that.
No,
because
no.
It's not a star; it's a planet. So and the second thing,
He said it's not
the
a
argon
star.
40, that's a result of some sort of explosive event with potassium. Is that right?
Well,
Damn,
it
potassium.
means a lot of potassium was irradiated by neutrons,
Okay.
which is a typical byproduct of any
Yeah,
hydrogen
man, these are
bomb,
brilliant
or any
people.
Any nuclear explosive produces a lot of neutrons. That's where they got the neutron bomb.
And okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so let's.
Mike, and that's why I try to watch some of this. Maybe some of this brilliant can rub off on us, because man, a lot of everything that we've known, is so different than what we are learning. Because this is fascinating, right? This is fascinating.
Kind of hard to argue with, right? Like that's one piece of
can't
evidence,
argue with
right?
it.
Hit that like
So
button.
let's get into other possible evidence. So, water valleys seemingly across
Oh,
Mars, is that
obviously
right?
Mars was just covered with liquid water.
Yeah, we knew
I
that.
was the
We
one
know
to
we
find the
we've known
Martian
that
ocean.
for a
You
while
were.
Yes.
by
How'd you
him.
find it?
Well, actually, it was we were looking at Cydonia Mensa, which is a site where there's the face, and then there's nearby, like 5 miles away, there's a 5-sided pyramid. NASA never shows that picture of the face beside the pyramid together in any of their public photos because it becomes obvious.
Really?
We're
Because they're
looking
so
at
close.
archaeology,
And Cydonia is what region of Mars?
Cydonia is in the northern part of Mars. It was considered the garden spot of Mars. They wanted to land one of the Viking landers there. But then, into something that was kind of scandalous, the scientists running the Viking program, who were determining where they were going to land, suddenly found themselves overruled by a group they didn't even know existed on the project.
Who were they overruled by?
They were never sure. It
Well,
just said, NASA just said,
Sorry.
basically, the boys downtown say you can't land there.
Do you have any theories?
Oh, they had already taken pictures of Cydonia with the Mariner 9. And
So Mariner 9 was pre-Viking.
pre-Viking. That was the one where they discovered all the water channels and the Great Valles Marineris. But then the Viking pictures showed clearly this face, and then they also found this pyramid
Oh
nearby.
my gosh.
And
Hit that like button.
So and they were doing. That was part of the surveys to see if it was safe to land there. They were worried about hitting big rocks when the thing came down.
Right.
So it's a reasonable error. But then they just said, "Oh, we can't land in Cydonia Mensa because it's too rocky." No, it wasn't too rocky. It was the fact that the face was there and the
But who's calling these shots?
the Intel and Defense
Christ, he said
Department.
because it was-
NASA is I call it a hood ornament on the mysterious black sedan, which is the real space program of the country.
And that's just completely bound up with it.
It is.
Three-letter
They make
agencies
sure that they clear everything with the three-letter agencies.
Okay, so you have this.
That's my understanding.
So you have this face of Cydonia, the pyramid of Cydonia. You have this other artificial structure, which has recently been popularized.
The square on Mars, I call it the Mars Masada.
The square
Damn,
on Mars.
look at that.
You have
Square.
the even conventional understanding that there was probably water on Mars.
Oh, yes, there was an ocean on Mars. And
An
what
ocean.
happened is we found that there was a shoreline near Cydonia Mensa. It was like on the Riviera of Mars. And we followed the shoreline around because they had good elevation contours. And we found that the elevation contour of what was called 0 kilometer wrapped all the way around the planet, and the transition in terrain was dramatic. It was rocky and rugged. Above that elevation and below it, it was all smooth. Obviously, it was old ocean bottom,
Underwater.
and also the river channels all fed into this basin.
And if you were talking to a conventional astronomer or Neil deGrasse
There's river
Tyson,
channels.
nobody could argue with that. Like
No.
everybody says that water
Beaches,
probably
all
existed
that.
on
Oh,
Mars
yeah.
in
Well,
the past.
yes. One guy kept saying it was liquid carbon dioxide, which is ridiculous.
And is that taken?
That's the
any
only
role?
other. That's the only. You had to have something that was common, that was liquid, to make these channels. And
Damn.
water is the most abundant chemical compound in the universe. It's made of hydrogen, and oxygen is the third most abundant element in the universe, and so it has to be water. And so
Had to been water,
it's been
huh?
confirmed. I gave my paper at a scientific conference in 1986 to a room full of Mars scientists, and yet NASA will never mention my name. And,
Really?
Damn,
it should be called the Brandenburg Ocean.
That's nasty work.
Oh,
But
wow.
I just called it the Paleo Ocean of Mars, and but it should be called the Brandenburg Ocean.
Right.
And,
But who retrieved the images first? It was the Viking team, or was it a telescope, or?
it was the Viking team.
But then you sort of spotted it.
Oh yes.
Interesting.
And
what were you doing at the time? What was your
well, we
official capacity?
were investigating. We had good Mars maps. They were actually
What was your role though? Like, what was your job title?
in the independent Mars investigation, headquartered at SRI. Interestingly enough.
Nah,
research
champ.
agency.
Nah,
It's
we
the
here
place
for the
where
people, man. We here
found
for the
out later
people.
That the remote
Hit that
viewing
like button, champ.
program was just down the hall from
Yeah.
the headquarters of the Mars investigation. But what happened was, it was an informal investigation, and I was just in charge of getting good pictures. We're trying to get as many pictures as possible of the face on Mars and the pyramid.
That
at
face on
Cydonia,
Mars, man. They always
from
try to
as
say
many
it was
different
like
lighting angles
fake
as
too.
possible. And,
It's an
we had
actual
two
face
good,
on
really good
Mars,
pictures
yo.
at different times of day.
Huge.
And then I went and looked at a different part of Mars that was also on the seashore of this ocean, and found another site with two faces, one of which looks like the same face inside a helmet as at Cydonia.
What
it
the
was
hell?
it was kind of hilarious because we discovered it and we published it, and Carl Sagan had actually called me on the phone, and I was very deeply honored. But his conversations, Brandenburg. Nobody ever calls me John. They always call me Brandon. Brandenburg, why are you causing this trouble?
No way.
Yes.
He said, "Why are you
Dog, why you
causing
ruffling
this
feathers
trouble?"
over there in NASA, man? You know you sparking some shit up over there, man.
I get this phone call, He says, is this Carl Sagan? I want to talk to Brandenburg. And I said, you're talking to him. And he says, why are you causing this trouble?
As you know, I'm always on the hunt for things that help me stay sharp, focused, and full of energy while I'm diving into life's mysteries and making this show happen. And I've got to say, Mudwater has completely transformed my mornings. Back in the day, I used to struggle with that post-coffee crash. And let's not even get into the caffeine jitters. Mudwater gave me the smooth, steady energy I was missing. It's packed with functional mushrooms like lion's mane, chaga, and reishi, plus turmeric and cacao, all working together to keep me focused, calm, and grounded. Honestly, it's like coffee went on a yoga retreat and came back zen. What I love most is that it's not just about replacing coffee, it's a whole new ritual. It's a simple, nourishing way to start the day, and I actually look forward to it every morning. Every ingredient is USDA certified organic, vegan, non-GMO, and there's zero sugar. It's energy that doesn't mess with your sleep or make you question your life choices at 3 a.m. Ready to make the switch to cleaner energy? Head to mudwater.com, that's MUDWTR.com, and grab your starter
Oh,
kit
damn.
today.
Somebody gave me a
Right now,
dislike.
listeners
I didn't
get
even
an
know you can
exclusive
dislike
deal
on here.
up
This is the
to
first time I
43%
ever
off your
got a
entire
dislike.
order, plus free
That's
shipping
cool. I
and a
mean,
free rechargeable
if you don't
frother
like it,
when
change
you
the
use
channel.
code Jesse. That's right, up to 43% off with code Jesse at MUDWTR.com.
Shout out Jesse Michaels, man. Dude out
After
there
your
working.
purchase, they'll ask you how
Y'all
you
go ahead and
found
use
us.
that code
Please
Jesse
show
on
your
there
support and let
for
them
more
know
water.
we sent you. Keep your energy natural and refreshing all year long with Mudwater, because life's too short for anything less than clean, delicious energy. Implying that he knew more about this stuff?
Yeah, he knew all sorts of stuff. And apparently I was the first author on this paper we'd given at this conference. And he kind of was very dismissive. Then we found the second face, and we advertised that at this conference. And it was a place, they just called it Utopia. And so I got another phone call from him. He said, I'm sorry I was kind of short with you on the phone. And I said, we found another face. He says, yes.
Whoa.
I heard about that. Could you send me a copy maybe of this face, a picture of it, and tell me where it is? And I said, sure. So I had a bunch of pictures, and I stuffed them in an envelope. And I said, I got his address, Carl Sagan at Cornell University Astronomy Department. And I put it in the mailbox, and I actually watched the mailbox truck take it away and go. And then at that time, I was at Sandia Labs, and I left there in the next month, and I was moving to Washington, D.C. to work at Mission Research Corporation, really excellent scientific organization supporting the Pentagon and the agencies. And so when I got there, I gave him a call, I gave his office a call, and I said,
Make sure you hit that like
what do you
button.
think of the, I just talked to his secretary. I said, this is Brandenburg checking in. I'm in Washington, D.C. now. Just wondered what he thought of the pictures. And in those days, people didn't have cell phones. It was all, if you were lucky, you had a beeper.
Yeah.
Damn.
And so over the next, and I'm going in and out because we're doing all these marketing meetings. It's the Reagan arms buildup. My God, there's all this work going on in Star Wars and stuff. And every time I come back to the office, the office manager, who's this really nice lady, says, John, Carl Sagan called and wants to talk to you. And I would get on the phone to his office, and of course he wasn't there. And so we played telephone tag for 2 weeks.
Dang.
And finally I'm talking with my boss.
Back in the
about
day
we're gonna
stuff,
go
no
to the Naval
text
Research
messages.
Lab and pitch this program. And the office manager walks in and she says, John has a phone call. And my boss just looks at her like really annoyed, like, what is this? Why are you interrupting our meeting? And she says, it's Carl Sagan. And my boss looked really amazed and said, well, I guess you better take the call, John. So it gave me instant credibility. I mean, everybody kind of talked about me because of my Mars work.
Well, they were like, yeah, why is Carl Sagan all interested?
They kind of made fun of me as the Mars guy, and then suddenly Carl Sagan is trying to get a hold of me all the time, and so I go to my office, and here's Carl Sagan on the phone, and I said, well, Carl, what'd you think of the pictures? He says, I never got them. And we both had this long moment of silence. I said, okay, here's the frame number. Here's the long lat. Here's the, you know, I'm going to fax you a copy right now. You know, just give me a fax number and I'll fax it to you. And that's what we did in those days before the internet. And he said, thank you. And he called me back later and said, you know, this isn't as big as the first one. I said, it's about yes, about 2/3 the size. He says, but yeah, it's very interesting. He says, very interesting. And
that was it?
And that was it.
Dang.
That was it. And then they changed
Gotta
the name
give a
of
shout
the
out to
region
Brandenburg,
from
man.
being just
First
Utopia to Galaxis Chaos.
person to
And I
ever
really-
What's the
discover all
significance of
that.
Well, chaos means kind of cliffy ground. So it was kind of a technical description, but it was apparent that I'd thrown somebody's galaxy into chaos by finding this
Dang.
second face of Mars that looked like the first
That's
face of
crazy.
Cydonia.
There's hella
And now it's
faces
been
on
confirmed
Mars, not
it
just
is
one. It's a
another
few
face.
faces on
By
Mars.
this point,
Yeah.
we knew we'd found a dead civilization on Mars.
Oh
Yeah.
Lord.
And I will be very honest with you. When we found the second face, we also found shots of the first face in Viking pictures showing it illuminated at morning, so you could see that it was symmetrical, right and left. And then I'd found and digested the isotopic evidence. And when it all kind of sitting in my office, it all hit me. I wept like a child for about 4 minutes
Dang.
Why?
because they were all dead. It looked like a thermonuclear holocaust and had happened there. And we were so afraid it would happen on Earth, working at Sandia Labs. And I just was just overcome with grief. After a few minutes, I said, get a hold of yourself. I just started saying, get a hold of yourself, get a grip, you know? And I said, don't be sad, be happy. Because now you know. Now you know.
It's almost like when
The
you have
universe has no safety net. Bad things can happen in the universe and make.
it's almost like when you have a lost one that passed away, right? And you just kind of want to know how it happened. And it kind of like set you free. That's what he's talking about, that he experienced, that when he found out on Mars was a catastrophic event, and that's what wiped out Mars. So he's like, dang, that could happen to us too.
They don't happen here. So I became very, very dedicated at that point to see that we have a human mission to Mars, boots on the ground, to find out exactly what happened on Mars, to make sure it doesn't happen here. That's my focus.
Isn't one popular theory, even in, again, conventional circles, that Mars had a magnetosphere?
Yes,
and
it
that
did.
allowed for water to
Yes.
exist and stuff, and that its magnetosphere was somehow stripped?
Well, Mars is only half the size of Earth. It has about 1/8 the mass of Earth. What that means is its core would have cooled off quicker, and the molten core is what allows the liquid iron dynamo that generates the magnetic field on Earth
Damn.
to exist. So Mars may have just run out of gas, but
Okay, so the magnetosphere just died out.
it just died out.
And that wasn't. So you think they had actually extincted themselves before that, or after
I
that? They
think
were
so.
unrelated.
I think so. I think Mars had
And
very
for the audience, the magnetosphere would allow a biosphere to exist.
Yes, yes.
Would allow water and also possibly life. And
well, and it's, as they're finding out at Chernobyl, by the way, life can thrive in areas with a lot of radiation. It just
Facts.
mutates faster.
yes.
What?
And,
Mutates.
So accelerated evolution on Mars may have proceeded after the magnetosphere died. But there's other things going on. Mars looks like it had a dense atmosphere with a nice greenhouse going. On Mars, greenhouse effect was not a bad word. It helped Mars to have Earth-like temperatures, even though it's farther from the sun. And what happened then was suddenly all that was gone. Some cataclysm, what looks like a thermonuclear holocaust, blew most of the atmosphere off into space. So it's only got a thin, tenuous atmosphere left, and it leaked all its heat. And
Damn.
a planetary greenhouse traps heat, so even the core stays hotter. So it could have accelerated the decline of the magnetosphere on
Yo,
Mars,
that's
and losing its
hence that's
atmosphere.
why the planet is
There's
red.
still areas of Mars that are still strongly magnetized, and they found aurora over them.
Due to the magnetic field presence.
Yes.
Wasn't there a meteorite found in Alaska as well in the 90s that Clinton then spoke about publicly?
Actually, it was found in Antarctica. And that was
Antarctica.
ALH 8401. There's a certain type of meteorite called CI carbonaceous chondrites.
Damn, that's how
They're
rocks
basically
looking.
old lake bottom
Mars.
from some planet.
And this meteorite was from Mars?
Yes,
we know.
And that was a piece of lava, but it had a vein
Oh,
of
damn,
carbonate
piece of lava.
inside, limestone, and it was full of organic matter.
Oh.
And they
damn.
It looked like bacterial fossils in there.
Oh,
I found
hell
their evidence to be
no.
rather convincing. But they were attacked viciously.
We have archaeological structures on Mars that seem to imply that water existed at the very least. We have, conventional astronomers
Smoking on that trap house, champ. I just harvested. I just had a little harvest, so I'm smoking on that trap house.
There was probably a magnetosphere back in the day, and that would allow for a biosphere.
Yes, it would.
And then you have these artificial.
You don't even need, there could be water in the ocean, life in the oceans without even it being on land, and it would survive the radiation because the seawater stops all the radiation.
Right, right. And then you have artificial structures, and then you have Carl Sagan calling you saying, "Why are you making all this trouble?" So seems like a decent amount of evidence that at least,
Deeper,
at the very
dark,
least, this is
criminal
worthy of
link.
further investigation. And maybe we should move our probability from 0% life on Mars to much higher than that.
I think the data has received.
And then you have the
critical has achieved critical mass now.
And you have the isotopes, which are really like which nobody can explain. The xenon 129 and the argon 40.
The argon.
So here, this brings up another question, which is, I just interviewed Joseph McMoneagle, who's remote viewer #1 in the Psychic Spy program, and he was given. This is now public and declassified.
Remote viewers.
He was given coordinates to remote view on Mars.
Yes.
1,000,000 years in the past.
What the hell?
You can say that, as a modality, remote viewing is imperfect. But the fact that he's being given coordinates for 1,000,000 years ago is fascinating. And so what do you, and then I was just at his place and he's showing me all these correspondences between him and JPL people or whatever, and with these photos that they're sending him.
Wow.
And I'm like, are you sure this is real and you're not being duped or whatever? And he's showing me these photos of tons of artificial structures on Mars, and I'm like,
whoa.
He's basically implying to me that it's an open secret at Jet Propulsion Lab.
Holy
that
cow.
there was life on Mars. And I'm like, why are they not
What the heck is
making a
that?
statement about this? And he's like, oh, well,
Chat, y'all know
I'm
about
like,
this?
What are you talking about? Neil deGrasse Tyson, these other, Citadel keepers.
I know.
Rule the day. But
the old guard of Mars.
It's like,
if you were to walk into JPL and talk.
Yo, it's like all the scientists are telling us, nah, that don't exist, guys. Nah. Go behind the doors and they go, hey, guys, all right, so we're going to work on this and this and this, and then come back to us and be like, nah. That's crazy.
A random sampled scientist there, randomly sampled scientist there. If you were to walk into JPL and you were to talk to a randomly sampled scientist there and say, hey, I think there was life on Mars, a long time ago, and they might have, extincted themselves, what would they say? Would they call you crazy and laugh you out of the room, or?
Their eyes would dart around to see if they were being, or anyone was listening, and then they'd say, yes, but don't tell anybody I told you so.
Why is that? Why is that not some thing that humanity should just immediately know? That's just interesting and exciting. And
it's my explanation. Is it's partly due to just old-fashioned institutional politics and agendas, Jet Propulsion Lab versus
Y'all, let me take a
robotic
dab
space
real quick.
program versus the human space program based at Houston. But it also has to do with the chilling effect on American science and global science because of the UFO cover-up. I can say the Mars bone is connected to the UFO bone, and the UFO bone is connected to the head
Mars
bone of this government.
And so it would be disruptive from like we are the sole authority on,
Yes.
on Earth, or disruptive from a religious perspective, and it would just kind of upset people's worldviews and mass or something.
There's a great
They
deal
said the
to
Mars
that.
bone?
And that's kind of old-fashioned thinking. If the public's understanding and awareness has evolved sufficiently now that if you told them there was life on Mars, they would just accept it,
They'd be
especially it's
fine.
bacterial life. And even a dead civilization on Mars is not threatening. It's not going to invade us.
We've gone so far beyond. We're saying that there are saucers and hangars at aerospace corporations and
I
stuff, and
know.
like, people are getting into all this psychic stuff. There's
I know.
number one podcast in the country for a bit was the telepathy tapes, and you're saying that people can't believe that a million years in the past there was life on Mars. If anything, we live in this multipolar world that's a complete powder keg where you have
Yes.
mutually assured destruction between global powers that have nuclear arsenals. It would be an amazing wake-up call.
Oh, it would be. It'd be wonderful. But at the same time, you got to realize the public needs to be brought up to speed. It's once you find life on Mars, then you know there's life in the stars. It's just a given. If it's here on Earth and it was on Mars and it's still on Mars, by the way, there's a remnant biosphere there.
Piff.
And we have very strong.
What up, Piff? What's going on with you, champ? We got Mike Flynn in the house. We got Piff in the house. Let's go, baby.
Thanks for that. Then people know that there's life elsewhere in the cosmos. They've gotten over the first hurdle. The second hurdle is, are we the only intelligent life in the universe? And then you find the Martian archaeology, and then you realize, oh, no, we're not the only intelligent culture in the universe. There's a dead humanoid civilization. It's interesting. The faces look human. They don't look like lizard men.
And that's
They
what
don't look like
I was
praying
thinking the
mantises.
same
They
thing,
don't
too. They look like
little gray aliens.
You think
Nah.
the faces are fake? Because there is a concept called pareidolia.
Sure.
Where you see a face because it's a pattern that you're used to seeing or whatever.
Yeah,
and so you're sure that face is a monument that was specifically built.
Yeah,
to resemble.
it's slightly eroded, like all archaeology. You look at pictures of the Sphinx when it was first photographed; it looks like hell.
Yeah.
They've spruced it up a lot for the tourist bureau in Egypt because it's money. People want to come there and see this good face. But the thing is that there's pareidolia, and there's also another phenomenon in Egypt. It's called denial.
Yeah.
It's called denial.
For real.
Denial is not just a river in Egypt.
And denial is in a big part of people's
reverse
downfalls right there. They in denial.
You see a pattern there clearly, but you deny it exists because
Right.
the implications of it are unacceptable.
So
Yep.
who is covering this up? Who's at the top of the pyramid, so to speak? No pun intended. Understanding, that there is, because one more piece of evidence. You have Haim Eshed, who ran the Israeli version of Space Force. So all their, space signals, comms. I think he won some like national security award.
Yes, he did.
And for Israel 3 times or something.
Absolutely.
He's like very well respected.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And in conventional circles. And I actually am in touch with like an understudy of his who speaks
very good,
highly
very good.
and
The Mossad knows.
Damn,
The
he
Mossad,
getting
they
low
know.
key
That's
help.
their business to know.
I'm sure they do. And so, and hopefully, I would love for Haim to speak and for him to come out, because that would be such an amazing crossing of the Rubicon as far as his background and credentials. And he's getting older, but he says that there's a galactic federation, that there are like factions of aliens fighting each other.
Galactic Federation, like
American astronauts working with aliens under the ground in Mars? That there's like a biosphere underground or something? Does that seem crazy to you?
I'm amazed he's saying that.
Let's talk about a guilt-free alternative to alcohol that's perfect for your dry January or any time you want to unwind. Cornbread's organic CBD
Hey,
gummies.
let's
These gummies
go,
are an
baby.
absolute lifesaver for my evening routine. They're a natural way to relax, celebrate, or wind down without the hangover. I've cut back a lot on my alcohol consumption over the last few years. For a lot of you trying out dry January or cutting back generally, it's not always easy. But swapping that glass of wine for Cornbread CBD gummies is a total game changer. It's a simple upgrade to your evening routine that leaves you feeling great the next day without sacrificing the fun. Plus, with
Let's
all
go.
natural ingredients, they're the perfect way to stay balanced.
That
Cornbread
like
hemp
button.
isn't just a product, it's a small way to bring balance into your life. Whether you're journaling, meditating, or simply enjoying some downtime, these gummies elevate the experience without any of the guilt. It's like having a moment of calm in your pocket, ready whenever you need it. Alcohol doesn't have to be the default anymore. Whether you're cutting back for dry January or just looking for a healthier way to relax, you've got to try Cornbread CBD gummies. Right now, American Alchemy listeners can save 30% on their first order. Just head to cornbreadhemp.com/Jesse and use code Jesse at checkout.
Make sure you use
Again,
that
that's
code Jesse at checkout.
cornbreadhemp.com/Jesse, code Jesse.
Cornbreadhemp.com.
This is the good life.
All it requires is a nice breakthrough in propulsion and contact. Then it's certainly plausible in a science fiction sense.
Hey,
I tend
it's
to
420 over
believe
here. We
that,
gotta
we should just have
start
a
something up real
public
quick.
program to send astronauts to Mars.
light.
But my basic thing is 1, 2, 3. You go. There's life on Mars, past and present. There's a dead civilization on Mars that looked just like us and built.
That's all I
stuff
had
that looks
around
like
right now,
us.
but it is
It's
420.
not a threat
Y'all make
to
sure you
us. It's
puff.
not threatening. They look primitive. They look
Hit that like button for
bronze age,
420,
they
yo.
look human. They and they're dead. And did I forget to mention they're dead? They can't invade us. And that means,
Damn.
but something happened up there that looks like it may have been that they were attacked from space by somebody else. We have to go up there to Mars and find out what happened as quickly as possible.
Damn.
To make sure it doesn't happen here. And you don't tell me you're going to send a bunch of rovers up there. You could drive rovers around Cydonia Menza for years and maybe not find anything. You have to go up there and dig. Ask any archaeologist.
Oh,
Archaeology
damn.
is based on digs.
Digs.
You have to get astronauts or
Oh,
tools,
damn.
shovels. They have to dig down. They have to find hieroglyphs.
And you think at
So we have to go up there.
the final, I keep
That's
saying
the third.
I keep saying the final piece of evidence.
Yo.
Another interesting data point is Donald Trump on Joe Rogan Experience. He immediately pointed to Mars.
Damn.
He goes the men,
Dang.
the people from space.
Ooh.
They're talking about JFK, and then he goes, "What do you think about the people from space?"
Ooh.
And he immediately, there's some weird non sequitur to Mars.
Not to think that Mars and all these planets.
Oh,
have
he
life.
said Mars, yo.
Mars, we've had probes
Donald
there
Trump
and
said.
rovers
Yeah,
and
but-
Joe
I don't think there's
Rogan
any life
said
there.
it.
Maybe it's life that we don't know.
Maybe there was
Different
life
kind
there
of-
at one point in time.
So do you think like the highest levels of our government are aware? of
Yes, they
this?
are. Yes, they are.
Okay, and there's just some tacit cover up because of some kind of Cold War secrecy overhang.
Hold on. We're not just gonna skip right by that. We're not gonna just skip right by that.
Because
Well,
we,
Mars, we've had
Wait a
probes there
minute.
and
Well,
rovers,
yeah,
and
but-
I don't think there's any life there.
well, maybe it's life that we don't know, but maybe
Well,
it's
maybe
a
there was
different
life
kind
there
of
at one point in time.
So do you think like the highest levels of our government are aware? of
Yes, they
this?
are. Yes, they are.
Okay, and there's just some tacit cover up because of some kind of Cold War secrecy overhang of not wanting to kind of rock the boat too much.
Well, the UFO cover-up is the crown jewels, but the treasury, the box of treasure, is actually on Mars.
What about the moon? Is the moon bound up? Because there are some weird. the moon has a bunch
We've
of
already,
anomalies.
we've been to the front side of the moon.
Yeah.
If people want to watch Earth and monitor our stuff, then the moon is strategic.
Oh.
So you would have bases there, but you have them on the far side, interestingly enough. It's almost as if you're
What?
afraid we'll see them.
What?
The UFO cover-up people didn't want any extraterrestrial life or intelligence talked about. But Mars, my view is the human race is extremely fortunate. We have a nearby planet, easily.
Hold on. Do you notice how they were asking him? They were trying to pry some stuff about the moon, and he kind of quickly answered on it, but he went right back to Mars. He's like, pivot.
Accessible just by we don't even need to use breakthrough propulsion to get there. We can get there with sheet metal, liquid propane or methane, liquid natural gas, and liquid oxygen. And you can make that on Mars to refuel. I mean, we've got all these rovers roving around. It's very easy. Has anyone interfered with us doing this? No.
Whoa.
They want us to get acquainted with the fact that we're not alone in the universe.
Wait. Who is they?
I believe get acquainted with the fact doing this? No. Roving around. It's very easy. Has anyone interfered with us doing this? No. They want us to get acquainted with the fact that we're not alone in the universe. I believe the Galactic Federation, whatever you call them, they want us to advance, and they're watching out for us. But Mars is a golden opportunity for the U.S. government to advance disclosure without making the public feel threatened.
Various it's good. I like that. That's like a political
You don't want. It's the bat signal.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's hope the right people hear that. That would be an interesting kind of
Elon Musk
Facts,
can call
Piff.
me anytime
Facts.
he wants.
I love it.
And I'll take calls from the president too. President Trump.
I'm sure you will. You mentioned a name earlier, Richard Hoagland. He wrote a couple of books. He wrote Dark Mission, and then another one about monuments on Mars. The Dark Mission stuff gets into like NASA being some like occult, ritualistic, organization, literally like doing launches at specific times of the day and year, and engaging in rituals.
I don't know.
He said, "Hey, that's not my thing. Don't mix me with that." Boo.
Is actually from Whitley Strieber, who I've sat down with a couple times, and he said one of the management people had said at Jet Propulsion Lab, they were talking about finding life on Mars, and one manager had scolded the rest of the managers, saying, "Don't you realize that life on Mars means death for JPL? Because that'll mean Houston." This is Houston versus Pasadena. And Mars right now is an all-you-can-eat buffet for jet propulsion.
Why is it death for JPL?
Because it means that they'll get all the money will go to the human space flight, not robotics. And by the way,
that's really limited thinking.
Well, that's very limited thinking. I don't believe that. I don't believe that, but they do.
That can't be the over. They have to be smarter than to actually believe that. I'm sorry, but you have to believe that if we found life on Mars, you would get a net increase both on the robotics and human side as far as exploration of Mars.
But that's not the way. If you're an upper management at Jet Propulsion Lab, you might not look at it that way.
You're risk averse, and you're a bureaucrat, and you don't get fired. You don't want to rock the boat. I understand all those local incentives, but the idea that you wouldn't have more resources poured into your organization, which ultimately is probably even good for your local incentives if you were higher up there. But you are talking about this ontological truth that rocks the boat on a social level.
Rocks the boat,
and usually.
How to create dope t-shirt designs for a print-on-demand store. Whether you're creating t-shirt designs for clients or for yourself, it can be hard.
Usually the people that work at these places are not selected for based on their, desire to rock the boat. So I could see how emergently you'd net out anti-disclosure of something like this, maybe. But I still think it's ridiculous, and they should just disclose it.
Well, when the amounts of money get large enough, even ridiculous things that normal people like us would think are ridiculous become concerns.
Right.
And
that's a fact.
They view that things are working fine.
Yeah, I mean, you think
why fix it?
you think about it like this. I mean, us now, we're saying, look, we can handle the truth. Tell us the truth. And to them, they still have concerns. And what is the concerns? We don't know. They don't. We know that they're lying to us, right? We know that they're slowly telling us the truth, but they've never said why they hid the truth from us, you know?
Why change anything?
Can you, so, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to accuse both of us of being quacky or crazy just because.
Oh, get used to that.
Of course. I am used to it. But
yeah, I'm very used to it.
Updates in tech or science that you've contributed to just in a conventional sense?
Oh, yeah.
So that, like, they don't think you're some insane person?
Oh, I invented the water-based microwave electrothermal thruster.
Really?
And using water as fuel. And I got it working, and now it's flown in space successfully.
That's
And
amazing.
it uses just distilled water as fuel and uses microwaves.
Where is it being used?
Well, it's being flown in a spacecraft. They found it with, they fired it.
He said, well, it's in space right now.
It was a space tug.
What company operational?
Momentous
Space?
Yes.
So they do like ride share and space tugs and.
They're doing space tugs.
New space engine, continuous successful in space testing.
Got everything running for them, and so it was great fun.
My man's
and,
legit.
on it. And
like
I think
as
the patent
legit as you can
expired.
get.
They waited till the patent had expired and then hired me as a consultant to get it to fly. So so that was one thing I did. I'm also the only person who's gotten a simple formula for big G with no diddle factors in it. I took it to a string theory conference and presented it there, and they gave me the ultimate compliment at that conference.
What did they say?
They got mad at me.
Wow.
Because they never been able to derive the value of the gravitation constant from string theory.
How do you, like, the thing
from
about
string theory,
of everything, which you have, it's so hard.
Oh.
You know, like my buddy Eric Weinstein, he has a theory of everything called geometric unity. You have quantum loop gravity. You have.
That's been discredited now.
Sure. You have string theory. You have so many theories of everything.
Right.
And if you're.
My theory is not a theory of everything. It's a theory of basically what's observed. Pretty much.
You have Wolfram physics. My point is like.
Oh yeah, well, we're all trying to solve the big problem. It's the Einstein unification problem we're trying to solve, but the string theory people have gotten distracted by adding 11 new dimensions when all you need is actually just one new dimension. That's actually the thumb on the hand.
The fifth dimensional. Can you experimentally prove your theory?
Yes.
How?
Oh, I presented at a conference. We got experiments where we found we could pulse electromagnetic fields and get a local weakening of gravity that we could easily measure. It was like a 1 part per thousand. It wasn't, we didn't have anything flying around the room. It was basically like coils beneath balloons that we could turn on the power, and they.
If you got some physicists from Stanford or MIT or whatever to, try to stress test the experimental protocol, would they have anything they'd be able to say, like to discredit the experiment?
No.
So this is what
I got up. We have 3 different methods of doing this, and I presented it at the APS meeting, gravity modification.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for somebody to verify it because we.
It's interesting, and I don't know. I don't know if your theory is right or wrong. But like, it's interesting. I speak to a lot of these scientists at prestigious places. Like a buddy who's a PhD, physics at Stanford, and I'm like, talking to him about experiments that could prove various theories of everything, and he's always like, it needs a wow factor, and I'm always like, well, why? What if it doesn't have a wow factor, but it just like measures out accurately on this thing, and like you can.
He's talking about a big budget.
No, but it's true. It's like you have all these competing theories of everything, and a lot of them are attached to scientists like yourself who seem like they've done credible things in other areas. So like you can't a priori just write off. But the theory is
that doesn't stop anyone.
But the theory is sort of sitting in this like liminal space where you're like, I got this small effect. And then like, I'm waiting for peer review or whatever. I'm like, nobody else is qualified to peer review it. And like the effects are small. And it's just it's frustrating.
Oh, it is frustrating, but I've learned to become patient, and
Facts.
presented at a conference.
Patience
It was
is key,
well-received.
yo.
I showed
Patience is
everything
key.
on how to do it. Yeah.
What do you need resources wise to make this more consensus?
You can do these experiments for about the simplest experiment you do for about $200, and then the other ones.
The simplest experiment you can do for $200.
Yes.
Dang.
Are you serious?
It's just a mylar balloon with some toy motor armature hung beneath it. You hit it with about 30 watts of AC power.
Yeah, you gotta
400
understand.
hertz,
Back in the
and
day,
it'll
they
get
just
lighter.
threw a log out
The
in
balloon will
water,
rise.
So you'll see weight reduction.
making
You'll
tests
see weight
like that.
reduction, and it's just a balloon. It's just something hanging below. I have a video of it, and I can and then we also we hung it from hung a coil. Is the best way to do it is use Tesla 3-phase rotating power, which is very commonly used now in a lot of motors. For drones. It's very lightweight, very compact, very powerful.
3-phase.
And we got things to lose, like they weighed 100 grams, and we get them to lose like half a gram.
Can you explain what's happening to cause the weight reduction?
Yes. I mean, we have what's called a vacuum Bernoulli equation, which basically says, if you imagine people are used to electric lines of force. That's somebody touching Van de Graaff generator and their hair all stands up. Those are electric lines of force. The hair basically is materializing those, and then magnetic lines of force. You just shake, put a piece of paper over a magnet and shake iron filings. You see these lines of force from the magnetism, and then gravity has lines of force too. It's basically just raindrops follow the lines of force of gravity. And apparently we get the lines of force to basically move away from the object and just be just concentrated in the areas around the object.
Okay.
And so the object itself feels less gravity.
Ah.
And that's the center of mass. And so if it's like hung underneath a balloon, the balloon will rise and because it's more buoyant.
You're right.
There's less force resisting the force of buoyancy, and then, or you can put it on a chemical scale and do it that way. People don't like doing the chemical scale because it looks like, well, maybe the electromagnetic field's interfering with the chemical scale, but we were able to show that wasn't happening.
So where in your theory, where does gravity and electromagnetism, where do they unify?
Okay, the key to unifying gravity and electromagnetism is called the pointing vector. If you combine electric and magnetic fields, like in a ray of light, it points in the direction of the travel of the light photon, the light ray, and it's the direction of the radiation pressure. The theory I've proposed shows that gravity can be thought of as a form of radiation pressure. And this is also Puthoff's idea and Sakharov's idea that it's radiation pressure produced by the 0 point fluctuations. If you put
why is gravity constant or proportional to mass if it's caused by 0 point fluctuations?
Because the mass in a sense, kind of absorbs the 0 point, some of the 0 point. So if you have two objects in a room or a weightless, let's say you have a box on the space station, no gravity. You have, and it's a dark box, and you put two bright objects in there, they will repel each other due to mutual radiation pressure.
Okay.
But if you turn the box white hot and then have two dark objects in there, they'll actually attract each other. Because of mutual shadowing with a 1/r² force, the same as gravity. And that's a conceptual way, but then there's, of course, there's a plasma physics way where you have two plates charged differently so that there's an electric field between them and a magnetic field running down the plates across the faces of the plates. And every charged particle you put in there, regardless of mass, regardless of charge, all drift in the same direction at the same rate. Then if you if you tilt the plates relative to each other, they all accelerate at the same rate, and it looks just like gravity. And so I wrote the theory around that. One interesting result of it is that when you combine that with the metric tensor formulation of general relativity in Einstein, you get that the vacuum weighs nothing, which is reassuring.
Wow.
The anti-gravity effect of the 0-point fluctuations actually neutralize their own mass so that the gravity ends up weighing nothing in my theory.
Right.
And then, of course,
That's
it involves
crazy.
also the fifth dimension. So you can show that you can
Talk about
derive the value of the gravitation constant.
DARPA funded you to work on this?
Yes, 200 grand.
And what happened at the end of that?
I handed them a report, and they said, "Thank you, Dr. Brandenburg. Here's your check. Don't let the door hit you when you go out of the building."
They didn't
200K.
say, "We think this is valid or invalid."
Oh, some of them said that they thought this was quite valid, and they were very pleased. But the head of the whole program, who was signing the head of the program, had a very poker face, and he just said, "Thank you, Dr. Brandenburg, for your help." So I got the feeling that
It was pretty
wanted
serious.
to know what I knew.
I had
Right.
a DARPA program manager in here named
My dude
John
got
Blish,
paid.
and he didn't say this. This is my
He got paid 200K for the knowledge that he knew. Man, you gotta give a air horn for that. 200K for the knowledge that he knew.
speculation, but he kept having these programs, in certain cases with 9-figure budgets.
Yes.
Hundreds of millions. And they seemed to start to get successful results, or at least be very promising at the start. And then they would sort of go into a black box and, like, you know, they would disappear.
It happens. It means you're doing good work.
So that means you're doing good work, because you
Yes.
think it's being funneled into some sort of...
Yes, it's going black.
You think that's
Right.
gone black? Do you think that's going to the legacy UFO program?
No, I think it'll all come out. In fact, what's interesting...
Well, no, where's that going? Where's the work going, though, when it gets funneled?
Oh, Site 51.
Area 51.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I mean, they probably found some parts of my theory interesting. I think they had a working kind of engineering working model of it that gave them, the effects they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But they always wanted to get, a more polished physics model.
Did they ever try to recruit you to legacy UFO efforts, or?
I sense that they were kind of trying to do that at one point, but
What happened?
I was blackballed by somebody.
Uh-oh.
And that's okay. I decided I was
Blackballed.
probably fortunate, because I would have ended up at Site 51, and a lot of bad stuff happens out there.
Who blackballed you?
Oh, he
and
said a
how
lot
did
of
how
bad
did they
stuff
approach
happens
you
over here
initially?
in 51.
Well, I was talking to one of the intel agency's people, and they...
What can you say? Which agency?
I'd rather not.
Ooh.
And then they...
Said I'd rather not.
They kind of invited me to discuss things more deeply, and then I was invited to the headquarters of this agency and went through a very bruising kind of interrogation about something else, and it was like this person didn't want me involved, and he was trying to make me look like I was a bad person.
Yeah, when
know,
somebody
and-
don't want you there, they'll discredit you
What's
and
funny is
just
the
try to
person
get
who
you
was
out of
trying to
there for
recruit
sure.
me apologized to me before I even went into the room to meet with these people.
That's a problem.
And he says, "I'm sorry, John, about what's going to happen."
Make sure you hit that like button, man.
Basically, he was telling me I had been blackballed.
And who was
Oh.
who was the person blackballing you? Do you have a sense of?
I didn't know his name at the time. I found out his name later, but I'd rather not talk about it.
Oh, you want to talk about it?
No.
Okay.
It was in the it was in the lower levels of an interesting building, and I just it was.
I do think
all of us have good and bad days as scientists, and it was I didn't feel badly about what my answers were, but this one person was very unhappy with me, and so
Yes, it
kind of his
is,
way of
Mike
getting me
Flynn.
ruled out, and
Yes, it is.
it was an adventure, but I'd also become aware that a lot of the safety considerations that you find at a normal government facility are not followed at Site 51. And also,
Have you been to Area 51?
No, never been there. And but
And let me tell you, Mike Flynn, I don't know if you're around this area or you know anything about Vegas, but we see weird stuff all the time. Me, always, I like UFOs and stuff like that. I'm always looking in the sky, bro. Every time I go outside, I'm always looking up. I see weird stuff all the time.
heard of cases of people, being told to dispose of very hazardous materials, getting sick, and getting cancer, and then they ask, well, what was I,
DingDingDing.com.
Pardon
what was I
that.
handling that gave me this thing? And they said, you don't work here anymore. You never worked here. This place doesn't exist. And one guy had to take pictures of it from the highway and said, I used to work there. He had to tell a federal judge, see this, all these buildings in the distance in the desert? I used to work there. And the government attorneys denied seeing any buildings in the pictures.
Jesus.
I know.
That's horrible.
It was. And so I was very glad
They
I
denied it.
didn't end up there. And they were basically, the people were basically told, take this stuff out to, the back 40, dig a big pit with a bulldozer, hose it down with diesel, and burn it.
Jesus.
And then they stood there in the smoke, and the orders were so stupid that it was upwind of the facility. So this horrible chemical smoke got all over the facility. Everyone was coughing and wheezing, and they then developed cancer, lung cancers from what it is they were disposing of. And that's when they tried to, and the government then fired
That's
them
crazy.
all and wouldn't cover their medical costs.
Oh, damn.
It was just a
Damn,
it
wouldn't
was-
cover
it was
their
a
medical
horror story.
costs.
And the crucial day was they showed a picture of Site 51 taken from some viewpoint on the highway where you can actually see it. And the federal judge said, yeah, I see the buildings there. And they said, that's where we used to work. And the government attorneys said, we don't see any pictures. We don't see any buildings in those pictures.
Have you heard of a Z machine?
I used to
Yeah.
work next to the Z machine at Sandia.
What is that?
Well, it was what's called a Z pinch, means zeta. It means you're running a kind of a miniature lightning bolt through a chamber, and the magnetic force crushes the plasma, so you can get fusion that way. And it's a way to get fusion. And at Sandia Labs, they decided to make the chamber really small and the bank of capacitors that powered it really big. We're talking 1 million lightning strikes worth of power.
Wow.
Do you think you get with sort of high energy physics, directed energy, that sort of thing, do you think you get weird side effects with time? Because in general relativity, gravity and time are related. And, if you get enough, maybe, energy output, you might mess with gravity somehow. Even if, like the stress energy tensor in Einstein's equations, you'd need like an infinite amount of energy. But maybe there are ways to amplify that per this Navy scientist Sal Pais's work. Can you, via very high amounts of electromagnetism, kind of break space-time itself?
Oh, I believe it's quite possible.
It's
What
quite
does
possible.
that lead you ontologically? Because
Y'all make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel.
Open up maybe a portal to Alpha Centauri. It's time with a wormhole connecting you to Alpha Centauri.
So do we have some sort of like sub-Rosa space program
Wormhole.
that involves like portals to like other like star systems or something?
Dang, how you snuck that in
By the
there.
time you realize we're not the only intelligent people in the universe, and we're not the most advanced, because
Oh.
the universe is a lot older than we are, and then you kind of have to adopt
Everything else
a
that comes
slightly
with it.
science fiction attitude that, well, kind of everything is possible. Then you kind of
Facts.
finally say, well, what's probable? You'd say, well, if we had stuff like that, then people would blab about it in their sleep or in a bar or something. But then
They do.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
They
I mean,
do.
So we don't know. It's all very there's a part of intelligence work that's called rumint. People ruminate over things, but actually no, it's rumor intelligence.
Do you know anything? So that you would say no or yes on that sort of program?
I would say probably not, but maybe.
Okay.
Like I said, the only times I've been really wrong in my career is when I've told people, that nobody could ever do that.
Hey, thank you for that like, champ.
You know a lot about what happened at Roswell in 1947.
Yes.
So what happened there? It's known as the most famous UFO crash, perhaps of all time. This like dividing line, the advent of the nuclear age.
It is. It is. It was the beginning of the nuclear age. It was World War II had not even been over for 2 years. Everyone was still on an adrenaline high because of World War II and how it had turned out.
Comment down below if you want to shout out. Go ahead, put it on the broadcast.
100 miles, I think, from the Trinity site where they tested the first nuclear weapon. They turned the desert to glass, and it was a plutonium bomb. So the fallout in those days, with thousands of people getting killed every day on Iwo Jima and Okinawa, they didn't worry about safety stuff that much. So the fallout plume full of plutonium that didn't get burned up in the explosion, it just was still there, passed over Roswell. So there had a big strip of uranium, plutonium contaminated soil around Roswell that they conveniently didn't tell anybody about. And so then they had this, the 509th, I think it was the 509th Bomber Group there.
Oh.
They had all the nuclear weapons on Earth were stored at Roswell.
Wow.
All 5 of them.
Lord.
They had 5 nuclear weapons. There's entire nuclear weapons arsenal for the entire planet. And suddenly everybody started seeing all the UFOs. That's where we got the name Flying Saucer. Kenneth Arnold saw them in over
2 months before.
2 months before, and they were all over the country. And if you read Philip Corso's The Day After Roswell, the U.S. government went into panic mode because they started seeing a lot of them down in New Mexico where they were testing the V-2 rockets.
Oh, Lord.
The delivery system for nuclear weapons, and they had all the nuclear weapons on Earth stored there. And so he said they concentrated their security operations there.
They were watching over us.
They didn't tell the people at Roswell Army Air Base about it, though. They were out of the loop. It was compartmentalized. So the UFO cover-up, even in those days, was operating as a compartment in the U.S. government.
For real.
I talked
Nah,
to
for
the
real.
veterans from Roswell.
You've spoken to veterans?
Yes.
Are these first-hand witnesses?
These were first-hand witnesses.
What do they say?
Well, they talked about the wreckage being carried through. They said they found this wreckage nearby. Max Brazel found the wreckage nearby. Brought it into town, showed it to the sheriff, and the sheriff told him take it to the base. And so they did. He did. And
that's crazy.
People from the base went out and found, yes, there was this whole
It was a big old
football field sized area of wreckage out there. And
that is
so
wild.
said,
what up, dog? What's going on with you?
A very well-liked fellow, a very popular fellow named Colonel Blanchard, called up the newspaper and said,
watching this here thing, man.
We found a crashed flying saucer. Nobody, he had no orders regarding them at all.
Dang.
So they then they published in the newspaper, and what happened was a bunch of World War II veterans who were in a motorcycle gang called the Booze Fighters, which is a play on Foo Fighters, took over Hollister, California for a day and had a drunken party downtown. And that kind of stole all the headlines that weekend. It was like the weekend of 4th of July. And so then this story came out that they had a crashed UFO, and Blanchard, the commander at the base, got this very angry phone call from Fort Worth, Texas, a big air base there. I can't remember what the general there was in charge, but he basically chewed his head off over the phone.
Oh, dang.
And said, You're not supposed to talk about that.
Right.
It's a weather balloon. Don't talk about the wreckage. It's nothing. It's nothing. And he said, we're sending people up there to collect everything. So they said this. And back in those days, the Army Air Corps, it was Army Air Corps. It was not the Air Force yet. It was still part of the Army. My father was in the Army Air Corps in World War II. And he flying out of England. And they said this red-haired colonel showed up. Barking orders. Several deuce-and-a-half trucks arrived full of troops. They basically took over Roswell Army Airfield for about a week. They went and gathered up all the wreckage they could find. They had guys walking along side by side across fields, picking up any piece of metal or something. And some guys apparently put it in their pockets,
Dang,
people
was pocketing.
Colonel kind of took over the base and was known for just screaming at everybody. And
pocketing this stuff. They were pocketing
they had,
UFO material.
I-beams with hieroglyphics on them, and they had all these plates and stuff. They told me about this stuff, and at this conference, it was called Reminiscences of Roswell.
Oh,
and
Lord.
it was a bunch of people brought together who were the survivor officers and the daughters of the sheriff. And it was a great experience to be there. And I sat at a banquet next to these people, and we had a great time. But what happened then was, suddenly everything was gone. And life went back to normal, and they said they had the base commander would have a meeting with his chief officers every Monday morning. And Blanchard, the next meeting after everybody, the deuce-and-a-half trucks and the screaming colonel had left, they had this meeting. And
I'm loaded right now.
He says, well, what did you think about what happened?
Look at my eyes, yo.
And all Blanchard would do was laugh and said, boy, did we screw up. And now
boy, did we screw up.
That apparently was a bunch of people were completely out of the loop.
Oh.
I mean, they were guarding the atomic bombs, but that didn't mean they knew everything the government knew. And at the same time, roughly the morning of 4th of July, an object crashed on the plains of San Augustine about 100 miles away. It had a big hole in it, in the side. And a bunch of people saw it.
What the
and
hell?
then the same red-haired colonel showed up. This was a few days before the Roswell.
So that's that guy who goes retrieve all the UFOs.
Like the morning of the 4th of July.
He's that guy.
To everybody, and they gathered up this flying saucer that had crashed there with a big hole in the side of it.
Dang.
The dead aliens, and there was apparently one live alien.
Oh, damn.
On, just hauled them away.
There was dead ones, live ones.
A team of archaeologists investigating Indian ruins.
Oh.
And then there were some campers, and this red-haired colonel lined them all up and said that if they told anybody about what they had seen, the government was going to kill them.
Oh, Lord.
And their families too.
Unalive.
I mean, it was wartime, warlike secrecy. And you must remember, it was less than 2 years after World War II. It was loose lips sink ships.
Oh.
Everybody was still operating that way. These people remember seeing the whole sky light up because of the first nuclear test. And then wondering what had happened. And then the government saying, oh, we had an accident at an ammo dump.
Mm-hmm.
That's what caused the big flash that lit up the entire sky.
That's helpful context.
Oh yeah. So the context of it was everyone was used to secrecy, used to following orders, and used to trusting the government for everything. And so there were 2 recoveries, basically following roughly the early morning of 4th of July. And they were about 100 miles apart. One of them was a saucer with a big hole in the side. And the other one was a
That's
field
right,
of
champ. The
wreckage.
original Men in Black.
Something had exploded in midair. And what I found out was that we had a night fighter during World War II called the Black Widow. It was painted glossy black, just like the Spider, when the big UFO surge of sightings happened, they pulled all of those night fighter squadrons from Europe and Japan into the United States and apparently into the Southwest around Roswell. So it apparently what happened was they had those patrolling over Roswell to protect the nuclear weapons stockpile.
That's
Do
what
you
I
think there were
think too.
bodies found at Roswell?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
I'm quite confident that they recovered bodies. They even
J-Rod.
apparently recovered, the reports are they recovered at least one live alien. And they were the little short gray guys with the big eyes. And the vultures and coyotes had apparently eaten some of the bodies too. And, that sounds almost like human beings miscalculating. Apparently because I wrote a book on this recently called Cosmic Awakening, and I have this all documented in there. Or,
What really happened at Roswell?
As best as you can take the reports and document them. People make mistakes. Even people in outer space make mistakes, just like humans do. They miscalculate, and not only that, you're trying to find some plutonium. They're there flying over Roswell, trying to figure out how many nuclear weapons we have there, how big they are. But there's so much plutonium in the area that they have to fly really close to the ground to get a good signal. In fact, they're flying two craft close together so that one can get the kind of noise level and the other one will get the signal. And you could just imagine, and there was apparently a very bad lightning storm that night. So here are these people from outer space flying around. They're trying to get this very sensitive signal to get some good data. And there's lightning storms going on, and it's all in electromagnetic interference, which really bothers like sensitive electronics, but
damn, they hit us with that. It's cool.
P-61 Black Widow was vacuumed too.
Yo, that is crazy. So they're pretty much got these space jockeys, right? They're out there just in the UFOs, really grinding, doing their jobs out there, like from other galaxies, other places, right? Gathering information on us, make sure we don't mess each other up, make sure we don't kill ourselves over here. And then they just boom, they crash, and that's crazy. That's crazy.
Technology. They were used to flying through tropical.
Well, that's the conventional story in Philip J. Corso's account and others, is that it's some sort of high-powered radar directed energy thing.
I don't think so. It was they were during World War II. The Foo Fighters were commonly spotted, and there were all sorts of radar beams flying around. They never reported any crashes then. They would have been operating in the Earth's environment with powerful radar beams scanning around.
So is that some sort of myth? Like, that's what Stephen Greer and a bunch of other people sort of repeat all the time, is that directed energy weapons is how you take these things out, which I feel awkward talking about, because I think it's a really bad sort of semi-unethical thing if that's the case, but extremely unethical. But
very. Chap, you talk about how to take out
on the fact that there may have been secret clashes between our military and extraterrestrials, it's almost like going out in a plastic boat and running into some killer whales, and they start ramming your boat. What are you going to do?
Well, often it's like, I think we lure them in with nuclear material and then do that.
Oh, there's
isn't that messed up?
Well, I heard accounts saying that the government wanted as many crashes as possible so they could harvest as much technology. And if you can't capture one craft intact, you can maybe capture 3 pieces of different craft and kind of combine them together.
That makes so much sense right there.
Figure out the systems.
That makes a lot of sense.
It was the Cold War. We just gotten done with World War II. They were fighting the Korean War. remember in 1952, they were overflying, UFOs were overflying Washington, D.C., and they were still fighting the Korean War in Korea at the time. So it was very much I grew up during the Cold War and in the shadow of World War II, and it was, you know, I mean, all my uncles, except for my nuclear physicist uncle, had been in combat, you know, had been in combat veterans of World War II.
Some of the most interesting evidence I've found for Roswell is actually that there was a contract between Los Alamos and Battelle Memorial Institute in 1949, and it was around nitinol. And nitinol is basically this like almost memory metal that you know remains unperturbed no matter how much you kind of put stress against it or shape shift it. It always kind of goes back into its original form, and it's really
super
cool.
elastic.
And it was like declassified by Battelle in the 60s. So you have to ask this question: why was it like classified for a decade plus? And then why does Los Alamos have a contract with Battelle in 1949, right after the Roswell crash, or maybe Aztec crash of 1948, I don't know. But it lends some credence because Jesse Marcel is the most famous account around Roswell. He was, shown taking a picture next to a weather balloon, which he came out. He was a Air Force intelligence officer. He came out.
He's got this funny look on his face. I love it.
In 1979, he came out.
That's
and he was
crazy.
like, this was I basically was part of this cover up, and that was BS. And in fact, I handled this memory metal.
Yeah.
And that's what he says. It was a shape shifting memory metal. So you have the contract, and then you have the fact that he's saying he's handling this metal. I think that's kind of interesting.
Oh, according to Corso, a lot of the stuff recovered from these crashes, especially Roswell, was the seed crystal for a lot of the technology we have now.
There's clearly some BS in that book.
Oh, sure.
Because he had a co-author, I'm blanking on his name, but the co-author gave him 24 hours to edit the thing. And so it's like he didn't, it was clearly like somehow, the narrative was controlled in some ways, in a way that sprinkled in BS with maybe some real elements. So, but
that's a standard technique, by the way.
Oh, that's been the strategy in UFO world. It's why I'm so frustrated, like doing this show, because I know there's so much real stuff, but there's so much BS. It's the flood.
It's a very noisy signal, as they say. The signal to noise is low. I mean, they have a lot of noise out there, and the government will release pieces of supposed leaks, and they have what I call a destruct package in them. They have a something that can be immediately proved.
That's right. The government hands you a mixed bag, and then you have to sort of like, chew through it, and it's passage material, and it's recruiting, and it's all sorts of, it's very effective strategy, the flood the zone strategy.
Oh yeah, it's flood the zone.
And in the 80s and really the 70s.
It's also called blowing smoke.
I think UFOs.
Most of all. Blowing smoke.
Hynek was, he was the Blue Book guy. The astronomer, and he claimed to flip. And you had, James McDonald, who's this Arizona State, physicist.
Yes.
Who was earnestly looking into the UFO thing and had his own UFO sighting at Savannah River Site, this plutonium, reactor in South Carolina. And he goes to, and he's a serious physicist. And he goes to J. Allen Hynek and he says, "You've been, taking part in this cover-up. This is ridiculous. Like, what you saw in Michigan wasn't swamp gas. Like, this is BS." And J. Allen Hynek gets all sad, and then J. Allen Hynek, the nominal story is that J. Allen Hynek flips to being like reformed and pro-UFO.
He had a come to Jesus moment.
I think that's fake. I don't think that's a real story.
Oh.
Actually, this is really crazy. But Rod Serling, who happens to be my dad's godfather.
Damn.
And he made UFOs past, present, and future. So I think Edwards Air Force Base reaches out to him and like promises him like footage of a UFO, and he like gets taken through all these like hoops.
Amazing.
He's jumping through these hoops, and he like makes this movie. And Jacques Vallée, who's J. Allen Hynek's assistant, and J. Allen Hynek show up in the movie. And they're pushing really hard this extraterrestrial hypothesis. That's what it feels like. Which Jacques Vallée then sort of moves out of, and he moves more into this kind of interdimensional control system hypothesis.
Angels,
demons, that sort of thing, which I think is probably directionally more correct or something. But at least as I don't know, who knows? We're seeing a medley of phenomena. But you know, they're sort of pushing that. And then there is like a little bit of video from, I think, Edwards or one of the other Air Force bases. And it just is super unsatisfying. And there's a pretty good debunk of it online where it's probably just an F-4 fighter jet.
Yeah.
And like, I believe it probably is just an F-4 fighter jet.
That's what I
so
think.
Like, I basically think that movie was like lured in.
Facts.
Like to by like.
And they wanted
facts.
to be involved.
They wanted
Big
Sterling to be
facts.
involved, and then Jalen Hynek also. I just learned this. He, I think, provided the laptop to Paul Benowitz, where Paul Benowitz was receiving alien signals. He's being psyoped by Rick Doty, who's an Air Force
Yes, he
Special
was.
Investigations
They put
agent.
LSD in his toothpaste or
For
something.
something, yeah. And he gets visited by
I
John.
used to drive
lacing
into
him with
Sandia lab every morning right past Paul Benowitz's office at a company called Thunder Corporation.
Wow.
It was remote sensing. That was his specialty, ultraviolet, infrared, magnetic, everything.
Interesting.
And every morning I'd see Thunder Corporation. That looks like an interesting place. And then I found out later it was the scene of this terrible drama of him sighting things over. There's a mountain out in the desert at Kirtland Air Force Base called Monzano Mountain, and they store nuclear weapons there. He'd sighted UFOs flying over there a lot.
Side of a
had
mountain.
all sorts of
We
recordings.
hear that a
The
lot.
government came to him and said, Paul, don't do this anymore. Quit doing that, and don't talk about it. And he told them where to stuff it, and he
leaving us something out.
I was sitting there at a MUFON conference where Stan Moore, who had been the original leaker of the MJ-12, got up and confessed to being a government agent whose job was to monitor.
Bill Moore.
It was Bill Moore. Yeah, Bill Moore his job was to monitor the effectiveness of the PSYOP operation on Benowitz to drive him insane, so that no one would pay any attention to him.
And Benowitz ended up committing suicide.
I wasn't aware. I heard he died in a mental institution. They involuntarily committed him.
Dang.
And that's what happens. Generally, the government will at least, in a lot of countries, they will just take you and kill you. But in this country, they will actually approach you and say, "Quit talking about this.
Yeah.
Don't do this anymore." And if you don't listen to them, then they raise the ante and they'll put LSD in your toothpaste or give you cancer or something.
Wow.
And that's in other words, that's part of what the government is covering up, is a lot of its activities in preserving this secret.
Don't you find that interesting that there's a Jalen Hynek Paul Benowitz connection? I mean, that's pretty insane.
I find it sad.
Yeah. It is
because
sad.
Hynek, then being a smart guy, would have to realize what they were doing to Paul Benowitz. And then Hynek was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah.
Right.
And, if you, in my book, Cosmic Awakening, I discussed, was apparently the government's celebration of, through Hollywood, of an accommodation with the gray aliens. That they were going to have not only detente in the Cold War, they were going to have detente in outer space. But that didn't work out very well. And there was this reported military clash at Dulce, but the reports, I heard several reports of it in D.C., and Leonard Stringfield talked to me about it, and he said he'd heard 3 different versions. The only difference between the versions was the number of people who got killed, both human and alien.
Dang.
And he said that, so he believed it had really happened because he talked to military veterans.
Do you think aliens are good or bad, or?
Oh, they're like us. They're some
a mix. Yeah.
They're a mix. I mean, you pick a human for.
Do you think they're extraterrestrial or interdimensional or all?
Well, I think most of them are just flesh and blood like we are. They make mistakes like we do. They crash in the desert. The coyotes and vultures eat their bodies. That doesn't sound like an interdimensional being to me. But at the same time, human beings are partly interdimensional. We have a consciousness that is not, they're parts of the human being that can't really be isolated and analyzed scientifically right now, and that's probably a good thing. But
our soul.
Then you know, I'm just an Episcopalian. I was funny. I was a Pentecostal fundamentalist when I was younger. Because of that, I believe in supernatural. Yeah. So there are interdimensional beings, I believe. And what's really fascinating to me is that the major religions on earth are cosmic religions, where the supreme being is a cosmic God.
Right.
He's not just a God of earth. He's not just a God of human beings. He's a God of everything. And that makes our religious heritages among the major religions, and I'm most familiar with Judeo-Christianity because I am part of that religion, a Christian. Somebody can come from outer space and land in my backyard and say, well, I created you, I own this planet. And I say, well, no, God owns me. I don't know who you are. God owns you too, even if you don't realize it. I said, look, you may think I'm a speck of dust, you're a speck of dust to God too. We're all equal in sight of God.
What is God to you? How would you define God?
Well, he's the supreme being. He's the Almighty.
How do you follow God?
Oh, well, I just go to church. My Christianity's fairly boring. I just go to church and I worship, and it's a very personal thing for me. And I wouldn't even be doing this unless I felt God wanted me to do it. It's some parts of it are kind of frightening, but when I realize God is in charge, it doesn't make me afraid anymore.
That's beautiful. Well, Dr. Brandenburg, I really appreciate your time, man. This has been
a pleasure and an honor.
Blast. Yeah, no, likewise.
Thank you for the wonderful questions.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think people will really enjoy this.
Yeah, and also I wrote, I will mention,
yes,
I wrote a science fiction novel about everything I heard about in Washington, D.C., around the water cooler and the coffee machine. I have
y'all go get that book, man.
From Hollywood now, they're going to try
and we're going to check out too.
Love it. Well, thank you, Dr. Brandenburg.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Y'all peace out.
Great. I'm so glad you liked
it.